What's up, everybody? I hope that George enjoys his theme song. So you want to get right to the core. So you want to know what it's all for. So you want to come off knowing more. Well, you better get hip. The podcast by George. So you want to get straight to the show. So you want to know what you need to know. You want to know what we're all here for. Well, you better get hip. The podcast by George. Podcast by George. Podcast by George. He knows what he's fighting for. It's podcast by George. Podcast by George. Want to know what we're fighting for?
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome on in to George's World. It's time for another podcast by George. That music that you just heard, that's the inimitable Ron Placone with a theme song for Podcast by George. I've had a lot of folks say that they like that. And Ron, welcome back to Podcast by George.
Thanks for having me back, and I'm glad to hear people like the theme song. I'm really happy to hear
tell them about that, because everybody can get a theme song from Ron Placone. Tell them how that works.
Right. Well, my Patreon, it's behind me a little bit there, but it's just patreon.com/Ron Placone. I do a Patreon, and my general perks are I do a Zoom show just for my patrons once a week, which has been a blast, where I work on some new jokes. I'll play a couple tunes. Sometimes we just chat it up at the end. It's a fun time. And then I also do a patron stream once a week. The next one's actually going to be tomorrow. That's a little insider info. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. And the replay is only available on Patreon, and I just respond to what the patrons submit. And then the other big perk that I do is I will make you a theme song. If you are one of my patrons and you want a theme song, I mean, some don't want it, and that's okay too. But for whoever wants it, I will make you a theme song. And people have been requesting them, which is fun. I still have a docket of theme songs to get to, and I try to make sure I knock out one a week. First come, first served. And that's been a lot of fun. That's been really cool, because it's I've done stuff where it's if you have a show, I've made a couple show songs for people. I've made songs for people in their relationship. I've made songs for couples, which is really neat. They'll be oh my God, you made our day. This is for our anniversary or whatever. And I've made songs for people who want it to be about their job. Hey, I'm a therapist, or hey, I'm a CBD distributor. Hey, I'm a farmer, and I've made them songs. I've made songs for stores. Someone has a book and record store. I made a song for them, and I think they actually extracted the audio, and they used it for a radio commercial. They actually used the song for a radio commercial, which
Wow.
it's a really fun, neat thing to do. And it's been really fun for me. It's been a cool way to kind of connect with people and feel like you get to know them a little better. And it's just a really, really fun thing. And it's been a blast for me. And I think that, a lot of the folks have enjoyed it too, which means a lot. The fact that I can give them something that makes their life a little bit better, that really does mean a lot. And
I love it.
So that's been a blast.
How do you go through life without a theme song? I mean, you just
Right.
got to have it. It's a necessity, and I love because you share them on Patreon with the patrons when they get them.
Yeah.
So, like you say, it gives me some insight into the individuals, the other people in the community. It's a great way to learn what people are all
everyone learns
about.
about everyone. I mean, people, and I didn't know any of this stuff. I mean, some of the patrons are authors. Some of them are
Yeah.
take care of chickens. Some of them are volunteers for, they're doing important things, and it's really freaking cool. And yeah, so that's been so much fun. I really enjoy it. And I've done everything from my instruments range from my acoustic guitar, of course, and then also some of my instrumentation has included an empty coffee can I've converted into a drum. So it's fun. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, anyone, patreon.com/Ron Placone, you can get your own theme song. And it's a give what you can level. There are no tiers or anything like that. It's just one tier. It's give whatever you're comfortable with. And that's how you become a patron for me.
Oh, that's great. We usually save the plugs for last. We just kind of jumped into this. Let me read this little intro for people that may not be familiar with Ron Placone on the podcast here so that we can get that out of the way. Ron Placone is an American comedian, writer, and online radio personality. He was a regular on the Jimmy Dore Show until everybody went into quarantine. He's a writer for the show currently, and hope to see him back on there as soon as things get back to normal, if they get back to normal. And of course, a lot of people saw him first on The Young Turks. And Ron hosts Get Your News On with Ron, and that's kind of the home place for all of what we're talking about. You can check that out online. And I really like, he's the subject of a comic book strip that's done with his black cat, Lucy. And of course, I'm kind of a cat guy, so Ron and I have that in common, along with the love of hockey and for music as well. The bio continues that prior to moving to L.A., Ron worked as a road comic. He lived in Seattle, Nashville, Pittsburgh, and he spent a period living out of his car, and he briefly worked on a morning show in Nashville on the radio, I think it was India radio, called Indie Bohemians, and he had guests ranging from Billy Bragg, he's a great liberal, I think he's out of the UK, singer-songwriter, Jethro Tull's Ian Anderson, and of course, the guy that one of the groups that we have in common, the great Craig Finn of the Hold Steady, and I've heard that interview as well. Let me ask you something here that just comes to mind when I see that on the bio, Ron. I saw Matt Pitlick, I think is his name, a guy from MTV Land. He's a rock music critic, interviewer. He interviewed Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull. That's out of my ear, and I always liked Jethro Tull and Ian Anderson. Don't know much about him. The guy looked like Ian Anderson had dog poop on his shoe while I was interviewing him. Yeah, this Matt Pitlick, he really did not like him. Didn't like doing the interview and just seemed kind of disgusted by the whole thing. Very rare. I'll never forget it. Do you have any idea what his problem with Ian Anderson could be, or with Jethro Tull? What was that all about?
I have I'm not familiar with the person you're talking about, so I don't know anything about them. So I have no clue. I guess Ian Anderson can be a little atypical as far as an interview goes. I mean,
really?
he has a lot of different opinions, and he was always, and this is just like what I've seen around as a listener. I mean, I'm a big Jethro Tull fan.
Me too.
He was always kind of like, he wanted to be on the other end of like the rock and roll, like, hey, I'm a rock and roller, I'm doing drugs or whatever else. He always wanted to be more like, I'm sophisticated and I'm a gentleman and here's my cigar. Yeah. That was kind of always his MO. And it was kind of cool and interesting, because it's like, here he was, he still kind of looked the part. I mean, he had long hair and a big old beard all the time, as in the 70s and whatnot. But he'd be like, say the Aqualung album, and smoking a cigar and stuff. And so I don't know. I mean, maybe some interviewers that was a little off-putting. I don't know. I mean, I guess I could see that a little bit. When I interviewed him, I was really interested in talking about Martin Barre. He was their longtime guitarist since about the second album. Jethro Tull has had a lot of different members over the years, well over 20 at this point. Their guitarist now is my age, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
But their guitarist is like my age. I think it's not even actually called Jethro Tull anymore, because at this point it's just so it's just basically Ian Anderson and like whoever's with him. So I think it's called like Ian Anderson Presents Jethro Tull or something like that. There's some big long thing, and his voice is pretty shot at this point. So he even has people kind of help him sing now. So it's kind of just like Ian Anderson's up there and people are playing Jethro Tull music, and he can still wail on the flute. So that's still there. But yeah, anyway, so I was really, when I interviewed him, which I think was like 2014, it was shortly after Martin Barre had left the band, and Martin was like the longest running member. Like, he's been there since almost the beginning and has still been around for every reincarnation of Tull. And Martin left. So it's like, okay, and his answer was very diplomatic. Like if you listen to my interview with him, he goes almost kind of like a politician. He's like, well, Martin wanted to do his own thing and I encouraged him to do his own thing. And, so but it was cool to talk to him about that. And Martin Barr actually has his own band now, and they do a lot of like Jethro Tull deep cuts. And I've always wanted to try to catch them live. It's funny. I bought my parents tickets to see them for a gift. I think it might be my dad's birthday or something, but I got them tickets to go see Martin Barr's band, and my parents got sick the night of the show, so they couldn't go.
Well, Jethro Tull, just to wrap that up, I didn't know we were going to talk about them, but they're a progressive rock band in some respects. They do a lot of different kinds of music. They're kind of like Emerson, Lake and Palmer. They struck me that way. If they wanted to do really popular hard rock classic, man, they could do it. But that's not what they were all about. They had 3 or 4 really good songs for guys like me that like that kind of stuff. And then I'd buy the album, and the rest of it I was kind of lukewarm about. But Jethro Tull and Ian Anderson. Well, anyway, I wanted to get to the real reason that I wanted to talk to you, and Ron's kind of my left coast guy, folks. I mean, he's out there in California, and last time we talked to him, they were heading into the fire season out there. The state's been ablaze, and of course, now they've got one of the worst situations with COVID in the country. They've been are you under lockdown, Ron, or what's the status right now?
Oh, this is a fun topic for today, George. So our mayor decided he wanted to become the most ridiculous person in the country. We have this stay-at-home order where you're supposed to stay home except for essential services. And the reason this is a little ridiculous is because what they deem essential services includes film production, doing a podcast, getting a tattoo, shopping in a mall. But you're not supposed to leave your house otherwise. And if you do, and it's not for a warranted thing, you could get a $500 fine. So in other words, and I tweeted something like this. So if I want to do something non-essential, like get sunlight or exercise, that's not okay. I can get fined $500. But
Jesus.
if I'm going to do a podcast or getting a tattoo, no offense to tattoos or podcasting, I like both those things clearly, and I have a tattoo as well, but it's a little absurd. And so I just decided, well, I'm still going to get my daily sunlight. It's one of the few things we can still do in this crazy thing. Yeah. And if anyone messes with me, I'm just going to say, I am making a documentary. Can't disprove it. And hey, I might just document what's going on and put this out as a documentary. Like, hi everybody. We decided to make California a lunatic dystopian capitalism hellscape for a while, more so than usual. And here's what's going on. Technically, I could be fined $500 if I wasn't blabbing to a webcam right now. Does that make sense? Fuck no, it doesn't. But that's what we're dealing with.
If you can't get to the sunlight, you're Steve McQueen and Papillon, for God's sake. I mean, your teeth are going to fall out of your head and your flesh will fall off. That's probably a good idea. The joke that I saw yours on Twitter was you thought that open mic should be essential services. I mean, for the comedians and everybody, musicians that need to work.
Well, that's what. Well, yeah, that was in response to they're saying all this stuff is essential. Like, oh yeah, film production, that's essential. Podcast, that's essential. Which obviously, a lot of podcasts are just done remotely anyway. So you're just doing it out of your home. So it's fine. You can do it. But they're saying if you want to go be with people in person, you can do that because that's essential. You couldn't possibly do it over Zoom. It's essential. You're in the same room. So yeah, it's absurd what they're calling essential. This is also shortly after, earlier this week, they shut down a COVID testing site so that they could film a reboot of the movie She's All That. They're remaking the movie She's All That, which is a teen rom-com that came out when I was a teenager. Jeez. They're remaking it.
Oh, God.
By the way, it's just the Taming of the Shrew, by the way.
Or
at least I'm pretty sure it's just Taming of the Shrew. Yeah. I mean, all of them are just adaptations of a Shakespeare story, which is an adaptation of something else. But yeah.
Including the great westerns from back in the day. Those were all just Shakespearean novelettes, isn't it? That's for certain. The one thing that you said that I always thought was funny, given the circumstances that you've described, given the wildfires that we talked about, people are still wanting to go to California. I mean, the people are still moving.
People are still moving here.
Yeah.
They're still moving here. They're still like, well, the weather can't be beat. Gonna go to California. It's on fire. It's shut down, and there's still people all over the country that are like, still beat Scranton. Load up the van. I'm getting out of here.
Okay. Well, that actually, the talk about the media out there dovetails nicely into the first serious topic that I wanted you to talk about, because you're the only guy that I saw discussing this, really. And this is this FCC thing that I wasn't even dialed into. And I talk on my podcast all the time about the two things that I'm really familiar with, because I was on the air during the time when they had the Fairness Doctrine rescinded under Ronald Reagan. They took that away, changed broadcasting forever, and then the Telecom Act in '96 with Bill Clinton ended the prohibition on monopoly, so that we're owned by half a dozen media companies, top to bottom. All mainstream media is. But this thing in the FCC, this could have real ramifications for Ron Placone, for Podcast by George. I talk about that.
So, well, there's a couple things going on. They're trying to rush through the confirmation of Nathan Symington, who has no qualifications whatsoever to be appointed to the FCC. His only, quote, qualifications is he's helping Trump be the architect on this executive order blowing a hole in Section 230, which is some of the policy you're referring to. So what Section 230 is it's basically the pillar that upholds free speech online. What Section 230 does is it says that when someone publishes something on a website that permits any user interaction, the website themselves is not liable for it. So in other words, when someone posts something on Facebook, Facebook is not liable for that. But it's not just social media companies. Now, what the Republicans and Democrats, what people in politics are saying is this is just a shield for social media. No, it isn't. This goes into any user-generated content. So it doesn't just apply to something like Facebook. Say I read an article from the Washington Post and I make a comment below. The Washington Post is not liable for that comment. If you blow a hole in Section 230, they would become liable. Now, this all started because social media companies like Twitter and Facebook, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They're saying they're an open publishing platform, but they're engaging in censorship. We've seen it happen to people on the left and on the right, and it's wrong. It shouldn't happen. I mean, these are modern day town squares. We're in a weird situation where technology and the law are not in sync. Technology has passed up the law, and the law has not caught up to it yet. So what these social media companies are doing is wrong. And people in Silicon Valley have no business deciding what is and isn't real news, deciding what is and isn't free speech. So that's a problem. However, this executive order is not a solution. You can't fix a problem with even worse policy. The way I like to describe it to people, it's like the equivalent, you show up at the hospital because you have a broken arm, and their solution to fix your broken arm is to set you on fire. Doesn't solve the problem. Really does not solve the problem. That's what's going on here. So what they're trying to do is they're just transferring authoritarianism to the FCC instead of with a bunch of Silicon Valley bureaucrats. So that's not fixing it. And it's going to lead to more censorship, because here's what's going to happen. Places like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, they're going to be scared of lawsuits constantly. So they're just going to suppress all political speech. That's what they're going to do. And we've already seen this to an extent. I mean, since this executive order, since Trump's been trying to push it through, you've seen YouTube channels have been taken down. And this is all across the political spectrum. This isn't just one side or the other. This is on the left. This is on the right. Basically, if you're saying anything that kind of goes against the approved mainstream corporate narrative. So, yeah, this is it's a weird moment. And a lot of people ruling on this stuff don't understand it. You know, I mean, you hear people like Ted Cruz, and it becomes apparent that it's not that they're even trying to do something malicious in this case. It's that they don't understand what they're talking about.
Right.
They don't understand the cause and effect of the policies they're going against, and it's troubling.
Well, there's somewhat of a precedent for it that even dumbbells like Ted Cruz ought to be able to understand. Going back to my day, they were changing libel law back when I was in college, and it was a big deal. The Supreme Court ruling set a very high threshold for libel because they didn't want to have a chilling effect on media. They didn't want to have people afraid to report and to cover things because they were afraid of being sued for libel. Well, what you're talking about is kind of the same type of thing. If the platforms, if YouTube and Facebook and places like that are afraid of being sued, or if they're afraid of running afoul of like the FBI or the CIA, which people like us talk about all the time, they're going to deplatform us. They're not going to. Why would they risk that to give Podcast by George a platform, an opportunity to go on and really reveal some things? A lot of what is news today, real news, is coming out of the independent media realm. I mean, the great work that you're doing, and my God, I've had Matt Taibbi on recently, and Aaron Mate, and people like that. I mean, we'll lose all of that if this change comes into effect. And a lot of people are unaware of what's happening, and I'm glad you're raising or shooting a flare off here, I guess. I mean, people need to wake up to what's happening, and this is FCC Section 230, right?
Yeah, it's Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act. It's actually the person who really spearheaded it in the first place was, I believe, Ed Markey.
Oh.
And, he's just kind of been breaking it down where he's like, listen, and he said stuff to Trump and everyone. He's like, this isn't what it does. Like, this is not a good thing to do. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of folks have been sounding the alarm. And the one kind of reason for optimism is every digital rights organization is against this thing. Even the attorneys around Trump were kind of like advising him not to do this. They're like, yeah, this is not, don't try to do this. So there's a lot of reasons to think this won't really go too far no matter what happens. Although, Trump's going away soon. Here's the issue, though. Joe Biden also supports this. Joe Biden is supportive of this policy as well. So, they're both getting it grossly wrong. But, I can kind of see it kind of getting stopped from a legal end. So.
One of the reasons I like to check in with you, I called it, the left coast. I mean, a blue state out there. There's a Democratic supermajority out in California, and that's a little surprising, too, because you've got some surprising issues out there. This election that just passed, I saw where California actually moved Republican a little bit in the legislature. Did you guys go to the right a little?
I don't know. I mean, I wasn't sure of any districts that flipped. I mean, I'm sure it happened, but I know that as far as like ballot initiatives were concerned, California definitely did. I mean, we had another thing up on the ballot concerning rent control. It did not pass again. This isn't even like statewide rent control or anything like that. It's just the potential for rent control, and even that couldn't pass in a place like California. We had Prop 22 go through, which you may have heard of that, even not being in California, because that got a lot of national attention. That was the bill for Lyft and Uber to be able to designate people contractors and not designate them employees or give them benefits. They spent a lot of money here, like a ton of money. And it was a successful campaign, and they got a bunch of people to vote against their own interests, because there's no reason, given the laws that passed in California, there's no reason they couldn't have revamped the way their app works to make people employees and to just give contractors the extra ride load after the quota's met, and everybody could have gotten better wages and treated better, and you could still have your flex schedules. There's employees all over the frickin' world who have flex schedules. So all the propaganda that, drivers won't have any flexibility if we do this, that was all hogwash. It was all a straight up lie, so that they could get what they wanted and continue to exploit people and not give them benefits. So that did go through here. A lot of people voted against their own interests, and Prop 22 went through. And I think for a lot of these gig companies, a lot of these app-based companies, that's the model. And now they're saying, okay, we pulled this off in California. We're going to go pull it off everywhere around the country now. So us screwing this one up will have effects for the entire country, not just California. So in that regard, yeah, I mean, we definitely went to the right big time in these elections. And, even having a Democratic supermajority, we don't really get progressive legislation here. We don't have single payer healthcare here. And it was actually Democrats that stabbed it in the back and made sure it didn't happen. And they stabbed it in the back harder when we had when Schwarzenegger wasn't governor, because they were like, well, if we have a Republican governor, that'll be okay because he'll just veto it. But with a Democratic governor, well, it's going to look bad if they veto it. So we better just make sure it doesn't even get close to that desk. So, the United States, I think as a whole, is just an ultra conservative country.
Yeah.
And that really becomes apparent when you're in these supposed blue utopias like California. And it's really not a very progressive place at all. I mean, I'm at the point now. I've lived in the Northwest. I lived in Seattle for a couple of years. I live in Southern California now. I've lived in the South. I've lived in the Midwest. I even lived in Florida for a hot minute. The only corner I haven't lived in is the Northeast. But, my wife is from Massachusetts. So even though I haven't lived there, I have spent a fair amount of time up there. And I've traveled this country very extensively for the past decade, with exception to this present year. But I'm pretty convinced that there are no progressive places in the United States. It's just not a thing that exists. Are some slightly less conservative than others? Yeah, sure, totally. A place like California is less conservative than Iowa, generally speaking, and less conservative than Nebraska or something like that. Sure, I'm with you there. But overall, there really aren't any progressive places in the United States. Full disclaimer, I have not lived in Eugene, Oregon, but
Yeah.
but I'm pretty sure it doesn't exist at this point.
We're all red here in Iowa. We talk about that on my podcast all the time. We've got 6 congressional representatives, 4 in the House and 2 U.S. senators, and the state is as red as it can be. We do have those Democrats, but they joined lockstep with the Republicans and voted down that withdrawal from Afghanistan that I bitch about on my podcast all the time. My God, I can't believe that Democrats would do that. They do in Iowa.
Yeah.
And they also voted against that 10% reduction in funding for the Pentagon, that Mark Placone measure in the House. We have 2 Democrats used to have one that didn't win re-election, and they all voted against it. How the hell can you vote against getting out of Afghanistan? How can you vote against pulling back some of the unbelievable amount of increase that's been given to the Pentagon? But they did it. Okay, so before we lose you here today, there is a little bit of good news. You've got friends, you talked about the Northeast and your wife from Massachusetts. You've got friends in Maine. Maine's making some interesting news. Talk about that a little bit. What's happening up there?
Well, I think the Movement for a People's Party just registered there.
Yeah.
So they have the chance to get on the ballot. They registered in Maine. They filed the paperwork. They got to get the voters out. And I think, I'm not sure the exact number of what they need to be on the ballot. But yeah, that process has started. And for anyone who's not familiar, the People's Party is a new grassroots party that's trying to become a major new political party in the United States. And when you kind of look at history, the time seems ripe for something like that to happen. When the Whigs kind of got overtaken by what we know as the Republicans today, there was a lot of similar things going on where there was a lot of frustration towards the system. There was a lot of frustration towards the existing parties that had power. And there were a lot of fringe efforts that were going on to try to break up that duopoly. And then they kind of put something new together and it kind of coalesced and it became a force, and the Whigs became a thing of the past. I would like to think that we're amidst something like that again. And if the People's Party can become a big political force in the United States, a couple of things could happen. One, they could just totally overtake the Democrats and destroy the Democratic Party, which I'd be fine with. I think that'd be great, actually. Or the duopoly wouldn't go down without a big fight. So what they'd have to do is they'd have to kind of embrace changes that would alter the two-party system, things like ranked choice voting, and stuff, and hopefully even some finance reform measures, which would mean that we wouldn't just be a duopoly anymore. We'd have multiple parties, like Canada or other similar democratic experiments, which would be great because in this case, you would see alliances between the People's Party and the Greens or the Socialists, and you'd see alliances between, the progressives that have broken into the Democratic Party, which there are some progressives in the Democratic Party. They're there by accident, meaning the establishment made a mistake and they got through anyway.
They've been neutered. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And that's the thing. And they get neutered because, at the end of the day, the Democratic Party spent $50 million, $50 million defeating grassroots challengers. Now, I know that in the big scheme of things, that's not a ton of money for the Democratic establishment. But when you think about what they're using it for, defeating grassroots challengers, defeating people who are just regular people who want to make a difference and want to actually represent working people, they don't have a ton of resources. And the Democrats still spent $50 million making sure they don't win. So, I think it's time for a new vehicle. I sincerely hope the People's Party is successful. I support I support all third party. Well, not all. I shouldn't say all. There's some crazy parties out there, but I'm definitely supportive of the Greens, of the Socialists, of the Peace and Liberation, and I'd like to see a scenario where we all kind of like coalesce and collaborate and can kind of be a force electorally.
Well, we're out of time. I knew we would be. God, I could, go on with Ron forever. One thing I didn't get to do on the last podcast, I wanted to take it out with one of these songs that you've covered. These things are great. We talked about the theme songs to begin with, but there's two songs that come to mind. One of them it gets a lot of play. "Love Me, I'm a Liberal," that Phil Oakes song, and the other one is one that you did just recently on a Christmas theme. Maybe we ought to play that. I'll let you choose what we should pick here, but it is all about Jeff Bezos. So should I play the Bezos song to take us out here, or "Love Me, I'm a Liberal"? Your choice. What do you like? Geez. What do you like the best?
It's your show. You can pick. I don't have a preference. They're both really fun songs. And the "Love Me, I'm a Liberal," I will be adding a new verse soon because now I got to update it because Biden's going to be president. So I got to update it to have a verse about Biden.
I'm going to play that. I'm going to play Phil because that's out of my era. That's out of the 60s. Right. And the thing about this, it's great. I want people to think about this is how much, and Ron talked about it earlier, how much the country has moved to the right. You hear people talk about this Overton window. Well, listen to Phil Oakes. Listen to this song that Ron does. Of course, it's been updated and it's great. But think about this being done today. By musicians, and it's just not, we think that we have left-wingers in this country. We really don't. We did have a semblance of this back in the 60s before everything changed, and I'm a fan of
as far as people are concerned. I think as far as people are concerned, we do, but as far as representation is concerned, we really don't. We don't have a government that represents people at all, and we're not. I'll tell you what, if the United States was as conservative amidst the people that live there as it was in representative government, it'd be a very, very scary place.
Yeah.
So, I don't believe that for a second. I think that there are left-wing people in the United States. It's just we do have a very messed up Overton window, as you said, where it's like what we deem acceptable is so far to the right. And I think finally starting to break through that a little bit.
God, let's hope.
So.
Because it looks pretty right-wing. Ron, thanks for coming. The last thing I want to leave you with, I've been wanting to tell you this for a long time. You refer to yourself as a ginger because of the red hair. Have you ever read The Ginger Man, the book by J.P. Donlevy?
No, no, I've not.
I'm going to recommend that to you. Check that out. That is a great book. It's something that I had to read back in college, and it is something I would definitely recommend to the Ginger Man. That's going to be the new nickname for Ron Placone. Thanks for coming back on a podcast by George. We'll play that song and we'll take it out that way. Does that work for you?
That sounds great, George. Thanks so much for having me.
Folks, that's Ron Placone. And as I mentioned at the beginning, he's the comedian, writer, online radio personality. He's a regular on the Jimmy Dore Show. He'll be back there again as soon as we get out of this thing, get on the other side of this COVID deal, and you can check him out at his website. Get your news on with Ron. You can follow him on Twitter. My God, he's everywhere. I'll put some links in the podcast here, and we'll take it out now. We're going to listen to Ron Placone's version of the great 60s song by Phil Oakes, Love Me, I'm a Liberal. Well, that's going to wrap it up. That's going to do it. That's all there is, and there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.
I cried when they shot Michael Brown. A chill ran down my spine. And I cried when they shot Timmy Rice. Was like I lost a child of mine. But Colin Kaepernick's just disrespectful. And most of the cops are just fine. So love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal. You guys get it. My president's Barack Obama. The entire country adored. He brought us our hope and our change. And 30 million left uninsured. And I don't care about fracking or drone strikes, 'cause that ain't gonna happen next door. So love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal. Now I vote for the Democratic Party, 'cause they have the better deal. And I have lots of love for the Clintons. Always have, and I always will. And we need to believe all women, unless it's about Biden or Bill. So love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal. Now I used to be young and impulsive, but I'm not that way anymore. I've read everything by Marx and by Chomsky, even listened to Jimmy Dore. But I've grown older and wiser. Haven't I blocked you on Twitter before? So love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal.